Welcome to everyone to Come to the Edge today, where together we explore the adventures of growing and living in joy. I'm Joan Kappas, your host and producer on the Amazing Women of Power, the world's leading positive programming network powered by Raven International. The intention of this show is to uncover that joy that's inside all of us, because it's time to get our joy back, right? This is a hands-on show filled with many adventurous guests who are uncovering their joy path by answering the daily invitation to come to the edge today. They'll be sharing their journeys, ahas, tips, and tools so you can be reacquainted with your inner joy, uncover what holds you back from being more, and learn how to let go of what keeps you from experiencing your natural joy. And you'll discover how to choose joy and experience it every day. Today's guest accepted a very special invitation from life to come to the edge. He was given the gift of seeing life's bigger view in reality via his out-of-body near-death experience. Bruce wants to share his experience with us today because he learned some things that changed his life, and he feels strongly about letting everyone know that there is more to life and death than what we think or see in the media or experience in the everydayness of our lives. Bruce Bader and I have known each other since high school. We reconnected in 2010 via Facebook, and we got together now and then catching up on adventures. And since Bruce is such a great storyteller, it was always fun to chat with him about life. He's a social connector kind of a guy who's always telling jokes, planning gatherings, or connecting up with friends. Well, in January of 2011, one of our high school friends on Facebook said, "Hey, where's Bruce? Does anyone know if he's okay?" Well, this is the beginning of his story. Everyone, please join me in welcoming my friend, Bruce Bader. Welcome, Bruce.
Hey, how you doing, Joan?
Hey, doing well. So excited to have you here, and we finally get to chat together about this fabulous story. So thanks for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Hey, good morning, everybody.
You know, this is such a special topic for all of us humans because we're all interested in knowing what it's really like on the other side. So how about if you share your story, and then I'll ask some questions later in the show. Does that work?
Sure. It was a cold Thursday, January 2011. I had been fighting a very bad cold, so I made a doctor's appointment right after work, hoping to get some fast-acting antibiotics to knock out the bronchitis. While I was in the doctor's office, they took my blood pressure, and it spiked really high. And I'm one of those people that usually have very low blood pressure. So the doctor ordered an EKG, and as the graph paper started rolling off the machine, the doctor looked at me and says, "You're either going to have a heart attack or you're going to have a heart attack." So he told me to head over to Fairview Southdale emergency room, and I went over to the Fairview Southdale Hospital with my EKG in my hand, and the doctors brought me right in because I was having chest pains. And the emergency room doctors ordered x-rays and tests, and as I'm sitting there, I think, well, I better call my boss, Frank. I tell him, "Hey, guess what? I won't be into work tomorrow. I'm having a heart attack." Imagine that. So
imagine that.
yeah, and this is in between the tests and the x-rays that they're doing. You know, you're just sitting there waiting for the results. So then I call my adult sons, Scott and Mark, and I tell them, "Hey, guess what? I'm in the emergency room," and they tell me I'm having a heart attack. And I've got Mark to call my brother, Mike, and my sister, Mary, and let them know. So as time went on, I was diagnosed with 2 blocked arteries in my heart. And so they scheduled me for angioplastic surgery early Friday morning to insert the stents. You know how they put the stents in to insert it so the blood flow will go. Well, early Friday morning, they had one last CAT scan, and the University of Minnesota Heart and Lung Clinic doctors determined the blockage was too great, so they recommended a bypass surgery. Fortunately, Dr. Sofield in the cardiac surgical room was available, so I was scheduled for surgery that afternoon. As time went on, you know, my sons and my brother and my sister came over. Shortly after lunchtime, I high-fived, you know, my sons, Scott and Mark, and said goodbye to everybody, and they wheeled me into the operating room. They prepped me, you know, put me to sleep, proceeded to cut open my chest. While Dr. Sofield was inserting the bypass, they found 2 more blocked arteries in there that were smaller. So I guess I got the 2-for-1, you know, the 2-for-1 deal, better known as a quad bypass. And then, you know, everything went well, apparently is what I was told. However, there was post-operative complications. bad news was they couldn't get me to come out of the anesthesia. Kept trying to get me to wake up, but I wouldn't wake up. This was a concern to Dr. Sofilt and the staff, but they said it was nothing unusual, and they would keep me monitored, and my family said, was there for the rest of the evening, and they went home with plans on coming back early Saturday morning to see how I was doing. Well, Saturday morning at approximately 6:30 in the morning, my son Scott, his cell phone rang, and it was the ICU nurse informing my son that your father had a very rough night. We don't know if he's going to make it, and if your father's a religious man, you may want to call your pastor.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, post-op complications. And many months later, my family told the story how this happened, because you got to remember, I guess you might say I was in a coma state. I had no recollection as to what was going on. So months later, my family did tell me how the series event transcribed, and they described it this way. My brother and my sister, my aunt, my uncle, and several nieces and nephews were in the ICU family room right across the hall from where I was in the ICU cardiac care unit. After Dr. Sofilt and the staff made the rounds, they came in to discuss what was happening or give them an update. They informed my family that I went septic. The medical term is called septic toxic syndrome, or years ago they called it organ failure. It's when your organs start shutting down from a major surgery. I'd never heard of this before, but your organs start shutting down due to shock. Your heart starts shutting down, your respiratory system, your pancreas, your digestive system. My kidney started shutting me down, so they had to put me on a kidney dialysis machine. Like I said, personally, I never heard of this, but it can happen after major surgeries, and the most vulnerable people are the elderly and babies. However, Joan, I had a few things in my favor. I was 52 years old. I wasn't overweight. I didn't have any diabetes. I was in above average health. I was strong. I guess you could say I had a tough demeanor. And I liked living. Life was good. Good things were happening back in 2011. So that's one of the reasons why I made it out of it. I pulled out of it. Mm-hmm. As you know, I was in critical care, and my family told me that while I was in critical care, they were across the hall in the family room because they could look through the windows and see what was going on. There was 10 to 12 intensive care staff members in my room at all times, monitoring. I had like 7, 8, 9, 10 IVs going into me. It was a real touch-and-go situation. And what I was told by my sister Mary, that my two sons were sitting on chairs on either side of me, holding my hand and talking on their cell phones and crying to their girlfriends and trying to keep me alive.
Oh.
Yeah. And I wasn't improving at all. In fact, I was getting weaker and sicker by the minute. That was Saturday, and then Sunday afternoon, January 30th, 2011, the priest came and administered last rites to me because they didn't think I was going to make it. My family held a vigil through the night, and then early Monday morning a.m., more complications set in. I went into a ventricular fibrillation, or layman's terms, it's when the heart muscle starts weakening and just starts to shut down. My vital signs were getting worse, and I was in the cardio surgery room by this time, and the staff was using every trick in the book to ward off my organs shutting down. They kept trying to wake me up, I guess, and alert me by calling out my name and asking me questions. But I didn't want to wake up. Apparently, I kept wanting to nod off and fall asleep. I was in and out of a coma and unconsciousness, and sometime Monday morning, eventually I died. So I flatlined. Apparently what happened at this point is the staff was working feverishly to revive me, and suddenly I started feeling really groggy, and then the grogginess went away, and my chest felt normal. There was no heavy chest pains, just started feeling normal, and I started feeling a breeze, kind of like being outside on the breeze blowing, and it was an unusual feeling, and then I started to float. I started floating. I could feel the breeze, and I started floating. And a weird situation, and I opened my eyes, and when I opened my eyes, I'm looking at the ceiling lights, and they're slowly getting closer and closer. I literally levitated right off of the operating table, and I floated right up to the lights, and I stayed there. I'm in a prone position, up in the light, right next to the ceiling of the operating room. I look over to my right, and I look down, and I can see my lower torso on the operating table. And there was 3 critical care personnel leaning over my upper part of my body. They had hair nets on and surgical mask on. They were dressed in scrubs. And I remember looking at them from the tops of their heads, and I couldn't tell if they were men or women or anybody, or nurses, or I couldn't tell who they were. All I could see was the staff. Then I looked over at my other shoulder, and 2 staff members were working feverishly. I was coherent as to what was going on. And, Joan, I could smell the sanitation chemicals or the cleaning chemicals or the sterilizing chemicals they use in the operating room. I could smell it, and I could feel it, and I could hear it.
Wow. That's pretty vivid.
It was very vivid. That's the best way to describe it. Then all of a sudden, bam, poof, boom, daylight, Joe. And I'm standing outside of the hospital, of the operating room, in front of the entry of a white tunnel or a cave-like situation. I'm standing right at this tunnel. Now, it seemed kind of odd. Yes, I know. As crazy as this may sound, it seemed odd. So I started walking in, and I took about 10 to 12 steps, and then I stopped to kind of take an inventory of my surroundings. And I can describe it vividly because I'm looking at it in my mind so many times. It was tunnel-shaped. It was oval. Frosty white with squares in it, very similar to an Eskimo's igloo. I look down. I'm in my hospital gown, and I'm barefooted, and I'm standing on soft clay type of rock, similar to the rock that you would see in a baseball diamond infield. There was no IVs in me. There was no breathing tubes, no scars, no bruises, no stitches from bypass surgery, nothing. I was just standing there in the hospital gown. The air temperature wasn't, it wasn't hot, it wasn't cold, it wasn't wet, it wasn't dry. So I walked over and I touched the side of this tunnel, and I kind of even knocked on it and slapped on it, and I think I even punched it. In fact, I know I did. And the walls were, the best way to describe it, plastic. They weren't hard or soft, but I do know when I knocked and when I punched the walls, it made a muffled sound, but it didn't echo or anything. It wasn't loud. So I'm looking around and I'm going, I vividly remember shouting out loud to myself, Bruce, where are you? Where are you? Wake up, Bruce. I mean, I'm like, am I sleeping? But I was wide awake. And to prove it, like I said, I kept shouting, and I couldn't hear the echo. So I literally start slapping my face and, slapping my thighs, clapping my hands, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't asleep or I wasn't drunk or anything, because I was wide awake. And I distinctly remember saying to myself, this is not a dream. I'm not dreaming. I felt no pain. I wasn't scared. I didn't feel lonely. I was just baffled. And curiously, I couldn't figure out why I was just standing, 30-some-odd feet inside of this tunnel. So I did the next best thing, Joan.
What's that?
I kept walking. Why not?
Keep walking.
Yeah, I know. I'm walking into this tunnel. As I'm walking, I'm trying to debunk my skeptical male brain because, I have to have the facts. And as I kept walking, I was like clapping my hands, snapping my thighs, walking. I could feel the gravel under my feet, and I stopped. And with my bare feet, I wrote my initials in the gravel, just to let everybody know that Bruce was here.
Great. That's great.
So I walked for quite a while, and I don't know how long I walked for. And the tunnel kind of climbed up a hill and kind of went down a hill, and then it crested a hill. At the crest of the hill, I just stopped there, and I took it all in. And the tunnel went down left and then went up to the right. And as I'm looking there, it was the best way to describe it would be mountain-looking with a valley, very colorful. However, it was colorful, but it had a white hue over the color. It was a warm white. And the best way I could describe it is if you were to take a white bed sheet and put it over your head and walk outside on a sunny day, that's what the white hue looked like. I mean, you could see color, but there was a white hue. And it was very quiet. So I'm just standing there observing everything, in my hospital gown, my butt's hanging out, and no, really, I'm just standing, and there's absolutely nothing to be scared of. It wasn't dark; it was just bright. Picture postcard right out of National Geographic magazine. I mean, it was that pretty. Now, this is where I got the first glimpse of that mysterious white light. There was off in the distance, long ways away, I could see this white light. It didn't look like a flashlight. It didn't look like a floodlight. It didn't twinkle. It didn't swing around or move. It didn't blind my eyes. It was just pretty. And for whatever reason, I kept staring at this pretty white light. That baffled me again, Joan.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then, without any warning, just in front of the white light, I started seeing electric sparks flash, like sparklers from the 4th of July. Best way to describe it would be like a static electricity spark. And they, sparked and popped for several minutes, really not making a loud noise. It wasn't noisy at all. And then my journey took a 180. For some reason, and I can't explain why, the tunnel light dimmed. It started going dark. Much like if you were to take a dimmer switch and dim down the lights in your home. Mm-hmm. And I remember feeling a warm feeling, and my eyes wanted to stay shut, but I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't sleepy, I wasn't tired, but my eyes wanted to close, and I couldn't figure out why my eyes wanted to close and things were getting darker. So to fight off this, I started jumping up and down, kind of moving around to see, keep my eyes open and to wake up. But, Joan, it didn't work. My eyes just wanted to stay closed. So, while I was standing there and going, oh, here we go again, Bruce, with my eyes shut, who knows what was going to happen. And then it happened, Joan.
All right, don't go away. We'll be right back. You're listening to Come to the Edge today, aren't we at the edge, everyone? Where together we explore the adventures of growing and living in joy. I'm Joan Kappas, your host and producer on the Amazing Women of Power, the world's leading positive programming network powered by Raven International. And my guest today is my friend Bruce Bader, who is sharing his amazing out-of-body near-death experience of 2011, what happened and what he discovered because of his experience. Okay, Bruce, we're back to you. So you said, and then it happened. So what happened?
Well, what happened, unexpectedly, out of nowhere, Joan, I hear a woman's voice. And it's, Bruce, can you hear me? Bruce, wake up. Wake up, Bruce. So I slowly open my eyes, and there she is, just 12 inches away from me, staring at me. And I could see her pretty eyes over the surgical mask she was wearing. I could tell she was smiling because of the way she was looking at me. And her eyes blinded, and I said hello. And she said, glad you're back with us, Bruce. Yeah, her words were, glad you're back with us, Bruce. And I said, well, I remember saying, yeah, I'm here, but I had this crazy, most incredible dream. And the nurse looked at me, and she said, it probably wasn't a dream. And I just stared at her for the longest time. And as I said before, I could tell she was smiling at me. So I looked over to my left then, Joan, and there's the doctor holding these electric paddles, the paddles they use to juice you, get your heart pumping. He's standing there holding those paddles, and he's looking at me, and he's smiling too. And I looked at him, and I said, hey, did you use those? He said, yeah, twice. He said, twice? He said, yes, twice. So I lifted my head, and I looked down towards my feet area, and it seemed like there was a half a dozen to a dozen hospital personnel just staring at me. They're all looking at me. And I said, well, I guess those paddles worked then, didn't they? And everybody started laughing. But I was awake and I was alive again, I had flatlined. They used the paddles to get me going, and I'm alive again. So furthermore, what happened is I remained in the critical care unit. My organs were still shutting down, and it took a full week before they upgraded me to stable. My recovery process was very, very slow. But now it gets kind of interesting.
Kind of.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah. There's more. Wait, there's more.
There's more.
Now, this is where I have to put in a disclaimer. I'm one of those individuals, I guess you'd say a male individual, that never believes or never reads a horoscope or Zodiac or fortune tellers or fortune cookies or mediums that claim that they can talk to the dead. If that's your thing, that's fine. To each his own. And until March 2011, I was up and I was coherent. I was still in the cardio department or cardio wing, but I was in the general care of the cardio. I wasn't in the ICU anymore. I was still quite weak, but yet I could sit up on my edge of my bed, and I was responsive and I was coherent. And they kept running more tests, but I was still being monitored very heavily because my kidneys had shut down. I had a trach in my throat so I could breathe. My vital signs were stable, but they weren't getting any better. And then one evening, about 2 a.m. in the morning, a nurse by the name of Katie came in to take my vitals. We started chit-chatting for a while and how sick I was and how I beat the odds. And for some odd reason, I slipped out that I flatlined. Katie's eyes got large. She looked at me and said, "Did you have an out-of-body experience?" And I said, "I think so, Katie." She says, "Hold it right there. I got to finish my rounds, but I'll be back in about a half hour. I want to hear this." Now, Joel, this is where you must understand. I'm an adult white male, and sometimes I kind of have a callous and rough and cocky attitude. And if I tell an out-of-body experience of paradise, and it looks like the Garden Eden, this nurse is going to think I'm a Looney Tune. I mean, nobody's going to believe me. Mm-hmm. So Katie comes in, and she brings one of the nurse's assistants with her. They both grab 2 chairs, plop down on either side of my bed, and they say, "Okay, we're ready. Tell us what happened." Mm-hmm. And so I told the same story I just told your listeners. I described it everything. I described it in sequence. And as I was describing it, all of a sudden their eyes would get wide, and they would look at each other, and they would look back at me. And I would say some more, and they would look at each other, and they would look back at me. Now, after this went on for quite a while, I kind of looked at them and said, "Why are you girls looking so shocked?" And they told me it was amazing, the comparisons the story I had that they've heard from other patients in the hospital, in the intensive care unit. And I said, "Well, what part are you talking about?" Both kind of jumped in and said the levitating, the white walls, quiet and still, and then, of course, most of all, the distant white light. I asked them, I said, "Well, I was puzzled." I said, "Well, how come there was those metallic sparks, like it was the 4th of July?" And we were stumped on that until I told them about how the doctor was holding the paddles, the electric paddles.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
So through the process of elimination, we determined that those 4th of July sparklers were when they were giving me the electric shocks. Because right after the electric shocks happened, that's when I heard, if you remember the story, I became sleepy and I closed my eyes, and then the next thing you know, I'm hearing a female voice saying, "Bruce, wake up." And this is the first time I told that story, and believe me, I felt kind of foolish about it. They told me that this isn't unusual. I've heard stories like that before. What I saw, what I felt, what I looked at, what I described, I can honestly say it was not a dream. It was the real thing. Some people equate death to evil and darkness. And if you're looking for the darkness side of death, it wasn't any. It was only the bright side. Very pretty, very colorful, with a white hue, beauty, tranquility. From what I saw, it was wonderful. Now, the thing is, I didn't get to the pearly gates. I don't know if I got halfway there or 3/4 of the way there. Joan, I didn't get to see my grandparents or my parents, and I definitely didn't get to see God. I just saw the journey there, and the journey was good enough.
Love it. So, how did that change you?
How did it change me?
Yeah.
Well, the one thing I can say, Joan, is that I'm not afraid to die. I mean, what I saw and the journey I saw, it was beautiful. It was wonderful. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to do something crazy like jump off a cliff or jump in front of a moving train. I'm 56 years old. I want to live to 96 or 106. Living is good. I enjoy life. But the one thing I could probably say to your listeners, if you have elderly grandparents or parents and their health is slipping, it's okay for them to die. Just be the caregiver that you are. Comfort them, hold them, let them pass away peacefully. You know, there's no evil. There wasn't a black Sabbath. It was all beauty and tranquility. The Garden of Eden is the best way I can describe it. Something out of a National Geographic magazine. I also would like, and I would hope it's okay if I could mention that the hospital staff at Fairview South, the hospital, was wonderful. I mean, from the doctors on down to the housekeeping staff to the volunteers. And, Joan, God bless those nurses. They are built-in caregivers, and they were just wonderful. Oh. That Fairview Hospital ran like a machine, and they brought me back from the dead.
They did.
Yeah.
They did.
They brought me back from the dead. I flatlined, Joan.
Wow, that's it. You talked about, the journey and that, you don't know if you got halfway there, three-quarter way, but that the journey was good enough for you. Can you just share with us your journey on this side these days?
Well, I live life just like anybody else. I mean, life is good. I have fun. Things aren't peaches and cream. I still got some medical debt. I still got hassles. I'm still classified as disabled because of my complications. My heart is still weak. But I'm enjoying life. Life is good. Keep it going. Like I said, if you have elderly grandparents or parents and their health is deteriorating, well, let me put it this way. On a personal note, my mother, Pat, was diagnosed in 1985 with a rare form of leukemia, and the doctors gave her 5 years, and she ended up living 7 years. Now, the problem with that was the last 1.5 to 2 years, her quality of life dwindled drastically. She got weaker and weaker, and she was very frail and very fragile, and she wilted away to, less than 80 pounds. Finally, peacefully, she died in her sleep. It was a blessing, Joan. There were no more trips to the ER. She wasn't suffering anymore, no more pain. She just died quietly. What I could share with you and with your listeners, if Grandma or Grandpa passed away and you hear people say they're in a better place now, believe it, Joan. They are in a better place now because I got halfway there, and death is actually beautiful. Death is not evil. It was nice.
Wow. Talk about good news. That is the good news for all of us. And that life is beautiful there and life is beautiful here. Even though not everything is perfect, it's still beautiful and still worth living, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. And as I mentioned, I'm not afraid to die. When I'm 96 or 106, hell, bring it on. It's wonderful. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of that.
Prior to our show, we were chatting about this, and I asked you, is there any part of this that's not believable to you? And you had an interesting response. Could you share that with us?
Well, the part that I'm puzzled all the time with, and the part that I can't figure out, I can't get substance to because I'm a facts kind of guy, show me the facts, the fingerprints, the whatever. How did I get out of that operating room? How did I end up outside the building and standing in front of that tunnel? I have no idea how that happened. Then when I was walking in the tunnel, I don't have any idea how far I walked. Did I take 100, 200, 300 steps? I guess what I'm saying, I had no concept of time. I don't know if it took, 5 minutes or 55 minutes or 5 days. That's the part that's puzzling. Then, when the electric sparks, 4th of July sparklers were going off, how did I get from the tunnel back on the operating table? Those are the two things I can't figure out.
When you shared that with me and with us here today, that really is actually proof for me that you can't answer it by your physical body. There's no answer with that, but it can be answered in the fact that you and we are more than our body. That wasn't your body walking around, that was your spirit walking around, and it was your experience. What would your response be to that? It
was spiritual. And there was no time, like I had no concept of time. Your soul doesn't have time. There's probably no time in heaven.
And so you got to experience no time, timelessness.
Exactly.
So once again, Bruce, before we have to close here, because time does go by so fast here on this planet.
Yeah.
If you could say anything to our listeners today, what would it be?
Don't be afraid to die. Life is good. I enjoyed life. But when you do die, or when your elderly grandparents pass away, it's okay for them to die. Don't worry about it. It's beautiful on the other side. You know, the journey to get to heaven, I only got halfway there, Joan, and the journey was good. It was real good. The journey here on earth is wonderful. Keep doing it. Keep living your life and having fun. And the journey to get to the other side is wonderful. It's beautiful.
Thank you. So, Bruce, if someone would like to contact you, how could they do that?
It's Bruce E. Bader, B-R-U-C-E, then E for my middle initial, Bader, B-A-D-E-R, @gmail.com.
Wonderful. So if people have questions or comments, they can just send you an email, right?
Feel free to do that. I would love to hear comments.
Oh, great. And everyone, you can obtain the MP3 of this conversation at my website at cometotheedgetoday.com. And when you get there, you can look for the radio show button and then click download and listen to previous recorded shows, and it will be episode 9, and share that if you'd like. Also, at cometotheedgetoday.com, you'll find literally hundreds of free themed coaching sessions designed with the intention of assisting you in uncovering your joy path so you can live the joy-filled life you intended. And for those of you who'd like more personal support, I do offer one-on-one coaching, and this service is available regardless of where you live. So if it's your time to answer life's invitation and take that leap that you know is calling you, contact me on my coaching page or via email at joankappas@gmail.com. Bruce, thank you for this amazing journey that you shared with us today.
Well, I hope you enjoyed it, and hope your listeners enjoyed it. Like I said, it was a good time. It was a good time while I was there.
Everyone, thanks for coming to The Edge today. So until next time, remember that the destination is great, but it's the journey we came for. It's the joy-filled journey that is life. Let's journey together. Bye-bye for now.